Well, good morning, good afternoon, everyone, depending on where in the world you may be. Welcome to our webinar today entitled Automated Conference Scheduling with Juggler. And our topic for today is going to be looking at a specific use case for Juggler, minimizing breakout room excess capacity in order to reduce costs. My name is Franklin Smith, and I'm a partner with the Simon Phoenix Group, developers of Juggler. Juggler is brand new software technology that we have developed specifically for the large in-person scientific conference community. It takes a whole new approach at allowing scientific program committees, the people who are tasked with pulling together the schedules for large multi-day, multi-concurrent room, multi-themed conferences, a whole new way of pulling these schedules together in a very cost-efficient fashion. Today's webinar is not going to focus on what the software tool is all about and the theory behind it and the different approaches to scheduling. We've dealt with that in a previous webinar, and that information is certainly available on our website, on our YouTube channel. Later on in the presentation today, we'll share with you our contact details, which will include our LinkedIn profile, YouTube channel, email, etc. And before I forget, by the way, you should also see a button at the bottom of your screen that says Access Presentation Slides. If you click on that button, you will be connected to a PDF document that is available for download, which is the PDF version of today's presentation slides. So you don't need to furiously scribble anything down on paper. Today's presentation will take approximately 30 minutes. I'm not expecting it to take much longer than that. There'll be some time if any of you have any questions. By all means, feel free to put your questions into the webinar question pane or the chat panel. They're both available. And before I begin, I'd just like to give a shout out and a big thank you to the people at Webinar TV for making this platform available. So I am going to turn my camera off right now, and we will get started with the presentation. So today's webinar is really going to focus on a specific use case for Juggler. As I said earlier, Juggler is brand new software technology. It's an automated conference scheduling tool. And we're going to look at a specific use case that Juggler was designed to address. And I'm just going to take a moment here to sort of frame the use case for you. We're looking at a large scientific conference that is held traditionally during the month of July. As you can see, over 500 presentations to schedule. It's a significant number of presentations. There's also poster sessions that need to be scheduled. And like most large scientific conferences, it occurs over multiple days. It has multiple themes. It has multiple concurrent rooms. The example that we're looking at here has 8 or 10 concurrent rooms going at any given time. They also hold a very formal call for papers, where papers are solicited from many hundreds of authors. They are reviewed. They are assigned themes. And then papers are accepted. Acceptance decisions are made. A lot of papers are accepted. Some papers are not accepted. Those acceptance decisions need to be released, usually in the late February time period, with a full schedule release in early April. As with many scientific conferences, a lot of the people attending are connected to either universities or research institutions or hospitals or some other similar organization where the authors, presenters receive direct funding from their employers in order to offset the cost of conference attendance. And this is a very common feature with large scientific conferences. During times of significant or critical financial stress or inflation or general economic downturns, as we saw in March, April 2023, that is typically the very first type of discretionary spending that these types of employers will freeze. And that puts a significant strain on the ability of many of these authors or presenters to actually attend in-person conferences because they rely upon their employer to fund their attendance. And with conferences literally being held all over the world, there are obviously flight costs, there are hotel costs, there are lodging costs, etc. And as I said, many of these organizations have for many years funded their employees, but during during stressful financial times, that funding will tend to get cut. So typically the way, or at least in this example, during February and March, when the late February, when the acceptance decisions are released, and then into March, once authors know whether their paper has been accepted, they will indicate their intent to attend and present at the conference. So an initial schedule gets generated, typically during the March timeframe, released in early April. And again, in this example, where we had that extreme financial economic downturn stressor in play, many authors, many presenters began withdrawing their papers because their research institution, university, etc., told them that they weren't going to be funding their attendance. And so those withdrawals, once the schedule was built, and then once presenters started withdrawing their papers because they couldn't attend, those withdrawals left significant gaps in the schedule that was developed. In other words, there were breakout rooms breakout rooms and time slot combinations where there were no or very few papers being presented. So this resulted in a lot of excess presentation room capacity present in the schedule. In other words, large gaps in the schedule where there were rooms where literally nothing was happening. So that, as you can likely guess, that creates issues for the organization that is putting this conference on. Late paper withdrawals, literally 2 to 3 months before the scheduled conference, late paper withdrawals result in lower than budgeted conference registration revenues. The initial schedule of sessions with dates, times, and rooms has already been communicated to presenters, and now presenters are letting the organization know that they're withdrawing. In this particular case as well, there was a very short window of 2 weeks for the organization to be able to provide its final contractual space usage needs to the venue in order to be able to let the venue know what the guaranteed room needs are going to be. And once that guarantee is given, then regardless of whether the space is used or not, the organization is on the hook to the venue for those costs. So in that 2-week window, when the number of, or the specific presentations were withdrawn or identified, those that were withdrawn were identified, and the final deadline to provide the venue, there was the need to generate an entirely new schedule, hopefully being able to drop some rooms, particularly rooms that had excess capacity in them, but being able to drop some rooms to be able to contract the room usage needs. And then, of course, the organization had already communicated an initial schedule. Now there was a need to communicate a new schedule to presenters. So time's running out, the clock's ticking. the conference is going to be happening in a couple of months, and there's still lots going on behind the scenes. So the bottom line goals that were presented, and this example is taken from a real life client that we worked with last year. It was a conference last July. So this really pointed to a need to be able to use Juggler, our software tool, to be able to accomplish a few things. So you see them there on your screen right now. First of all, being able to reduce conference venue rental expenses as a means of improving conference financial performance. We already indicated previously that because of the presentation withdrawals, that meant a drop in overall conference revenues. So in order to be able to try and maintain its net revenue position, expenses needed to be cut as well. So there was also a need to be able to figure out how many breakout rooms could be dropped in order to optimize conference room capacity while still being able to schedule all the non-withdrawn sessions and within that 2-week window that I noted earlier. There was also a need to determine whether non-withdrawn sessions can remain in their originally scheduled room time slots, or whether they had to be changed. Because as soon as you start changing something in a schedule, and this goes back to the definition of the conference scheduling problem that I noted at the beginning of the webinar, and that is the subject of one of our previous webinars, once you start changing the schedule, that change creates other cascade changes that need to be closely looked at. So there was a need to determine those sessions that could remain in their originally scheduled room time slots and those that had to be changed. And then the fourth and final goal was obviously effectively being able to communicate all this to presenters in a way that didn't create complete and utter confusion. All right, so I want to talk about these goals individually. The first goal being they're reducing conference venue rental expenses as a means of improving conference financial performance. So I noted that time-limited opportunity, that 2-week window to drop contracted breakout room space and be able to lower overall conference expenses. The venue contract, and most venue contracts specifically, allow for a final release date without any penalty of any unneeded breakout room capacity, after which the contracted space usage is guaranteed and the organization is therefore on the hook for the full contracted spend. If you've ever been involved in negotiating venue space contracts with large conference venues, those contracts tend to go on for many, many pages. But if anyone is in that position, I would obviously caution you to make sure that that language is in the contract, because it can be critically important. Because when these contracts are negotiated 2 years or a year in advance, one never knows what the future is going to bring. We don't have crystal balls. And there needs to be some way of being able to have some flexibility in these contracts to allow for some expansion or some contraction of space needs. So what this allowed for was, by having this language in the contract, it allowed for a reduction in the conference contract spend. It allowed for an improvement in conference net revenues, because if your revenues are dropping, being able to reduce your expenses obviously will help the bottom line. And in the end as well, it will maximize efficiency and use of contracted breakout room space. There's nothing worse than putting on a large conference and people walking by and seeing breakout rooms just being empty and not being used. It doesn't send a good message, particularly for a lot of the organizations that we work with, which are nonprofits. They have limited budget envelopes, and they need to be seen to be making very expeditious use of their money, and having rooms just sitting around vacant with nothing going on in them doesn't send a good message. So that was the first goal. The second goal in this whole exercise was really to determine how many breakout rooms can be dropped in order to optimize conference room capacity while still being able to schedule all of the non-withdrawn sessions. So I alluded to initially a few slides ago that there was an original schedule that was created and communicated out to people. Presenters then started withdrawing their submissions because of the economy, so there was a need to now identify which specific presentations are now being withdrawn. The key here is to first determine the specific breakout room or rooms with the highest level of excess capacity. In other words, the ones that have the most vacant space in the schedule within the existing contractual and or other room constraints, and remove those rooms from the scheduling process. And then once that is done, then rerun new schedules using Juggler to create new versions of the schedule with the lowest usage room having been removed. So as you can see, this is becoming an iterative analysis by determining which then room, once a new schedule is generated, which room or rooms continue to show highest excess capacity, remove that room from the scheduling process, rerun new schedules, and then at the end of each rerun of a new schedule, determine whether all of the non-withdrawn sessions can be scheduled, or whether too many rooms have been removed and there's not enough room capacity in the schedule to support those presentations that haven't been withdrawn. So the conclusion of this exercise is to stick with the schedule that removes the most number of breakout rooms while still being able to generate a conflict-free schedule for all presentations. Now, it's taken me about 7 minutes to explain this process. Juggler is capable of determining whether a room can be removed literally within a couple of minutes, depending on the number of presentations, the number of constraints. I haven't even gotten into a discussion of constraints, but Juggler will take less time to actually run through the calculations for this particular case than it's actually taken me to explain it to you, which is saying something positive, I think. So the third goal is to determine whether non-withdrawn sessions can remain in their originally scheduled room placements or not. And this speaks to obviously the point around communication, but with a tool like Juggler that can generate many different schedules in a very short period of time, it allows for a comparison between multiple schedule data sets. So taking a look at the original schedule versus whatever revised or final schedule or multiple schedules that you want to compare, and then to be able to highlight those presentations that have changes to a date, a start time, or a presentation room, so that you can focus your communication to only those presentations and only those authors or presenters that actually do have a schedule change. There's nothing more frustrating than sending out a blanket email to 500 or 700 authors or presenters that says, here's a new schedule, please check your original scheduling information because it may have changed. Presenters nowadays, authors nowadays, and organizations nowadays are held to a higher standard. and being able to specify to individual presenters that, yes, your schedule has changed. It was originally in room A on day 1 at 10 o'clock in the morning, and now it's changed to room C on day 3 at 2 in the afternoon. That's the type of specific information that you need to be able to communicate to people, and be able to communicate effectively to keep the confusion down, because everyone's busy, nobody reads emails anymore. So it's important to be able to communicate the specificity of the information. And so by being able to generate multiple final schedule sets quickly, and then being able to compare changes between the two of them, and by compare, I don't mean visual eyeballing, because that's prone to error. I mean actually being able to take the data, use either a spreadsheet or a database, and actually compare data sets, and be able to get the tool, whatever tool you're using, to be able to highlight any specific changes. And I see some questions coming in. I'll address the questions as after the formal part of the presentation in a couple of minutes. So that was the third goal. And thank you for the questions, by the way. The fourth goal, effective communication to presenters of any schedule changes. As I said, Juggler can create multiple conflict-free schedules. It only takes a couple of minutes to do, and allows for the data to be used within really any data management application, spreadsheet, databases. There are any number of tools out there. A lot of these tools are very free to use, so it doesn't take any high value or high cost system to be able to do this analysis. It just takes a little bit of time and a little bit of knowledge. Being able to then do this allows for comparisons between schedules to identify those changes in presentation room dates or start times. And once the scheduling changes are identified, as I noted earlier, affected presenters can be electronically notified, typically via email, of updated scheduling information. So this was a case, basically a case study of how Juggler was used in a real life situation with a real life client. As I said, a conference last July, where it literally took, with all of the revisions and looking at all of the multiple different schedules, it literally took an hour for Juggler to generate a brand new schedule from the original. And in this particular case, I didn't note it in the slides, but this particular case that we're looking at had around 500 presentations. Of those presentations, there were about 70 withdrawals. This was a conference occurring over 4 days with 8 breakout rooms going per day. And so it would have been a significantly long exercise to do this manually, or to do this using the classic tools that are used for scheduling large conferences, either spreadsheets or the drag and drop sequential processing type of applications, where you have to go through, you have to look at each presentation sequentially, then press a button and say whether, and then ask the system whether any new conflicts have been generated. Those tools, as good as they are, though, typically only look at one constraining factor, and that is the obvious constraint to make sure that a single author is not scheduled, or a single presenter is not scheduled to give more than one presentation at a given time. So these tools will really only check to make sure that, let's say, Franklin Smith is scheduled to present one and only one paper on Monday at 10 a.m., let's say. That's what those tools check for. They do not check for any of the other myriad constraints that some of our clients are dealing with. And those constraints can include things like accessibility needs. One client in particular, which is a disability-related organization, wants to make sure that people with disabilities, particularly their presenters, are potentially scheduled in rooms that are on the ground floor of the venue as opposed to an upper floor, and that is to relieve stress on elevators and getting wheelchairs moving between multiple floors. So that's one example. Another example that we've run into is a conference that is recording some of their sessions, but not all of their sessions. So, say out of 8 breakout rooms, maybe only 2 or 3 are outfitted with recording equipment, AV equipment for recording the session. And they have very specific presentations that they want recorded and presentations that are not going to be recorded. So those have to be scheduled properly. The sessions that need recording have to be obviously slotted in a room where that AV equipment is set up, and others don't need to be. There's also another important constraint that needs to be looked at, which is making sure that a presentation where you expect a large draw of people is scheduled in an appropriately sized room. So in other words, if you have a very popular presenter who you know is going to draw 300, 400, 600 attendees, you don't want that presentation scheduled in a room that only has capacity for 25 or 50 or 100 people. These are all constraints that Juggler handles effectively, and is taken into consideration, is defined and is taken into consideration each time a schedule, each time Juggler auto schedules or generates an automated schedule. So that's kind of where I wanted to end up today. As I said, I see that there's for sure one question in there already. I'm just going to note that it is coming up to, it's just 10:27 now. I did say that we were going to be on for about 30 minutes today, so I see I'm right on time, so that's good. As you can see, it's very easy to stay in touch with us. There's our email, our website, LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube hyperlinks. For anyone who joined perhaps a few minutes into the webinar, you should see at the bottom of your screen an access presentation slides button. If you click that blue button, you will be directed to a PDF version of today's slides that includes all of this, so you don't need to write anything down. And with that, I am going to just turn my camera on again, and bear with me while I just move something around here. And let me read out one question that's been submitted. Please explain what format details an organization would need to provide in order to be able to generate a schedule. Okay, thank you. That's a great question. Juggler has been designed to input data via spreadsheet and export data via spreadsheet. So very straightforward. We provide our clients with the direction on how to create their data spreadsheets, and the inputs are traditionally the presentation titles, the names of the presenters, their email addresses, and a description of the rooms that are available to schedule in with their sizes, some allocation of presentations that are expecting a larger draw versus some that are expecting a smaller draw, and a discussion with us around some of the constraints that that they want Juggler to be able to work with. And that's pretty much it. So with that data, Juggler then will be able to perform its literally hundreds of thousands of calculations, if not millions of calculations, generate conflict-free schedules, and the data that comes out, the conflict-free schedule that comes out, is also in a spreadsheet format, which clients can then use to upload into a database or some other application that they all generally allow for import of data via spreadsheet. So I hope that that addressed the question. It is very easy to get data in and to export data out of Juggler. So I'll give it another moment if anyone else has any questions, and if not, it's just past 10:30. If a question does come to mind, by all means, you can send us an email with that question, and within the next 24 hours, the recording of this webinar will be up and available on our various social media channels. So please do, if you felt you missed something or wanted to rewatch, then by all means that option will be available as well. So thank you again, everyone, and I don't see any other questions, so we will look forward to welcoming you to our very next webinar, and we will stay in touch then. Thanks, and have a good rest of your day.